Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be graced by your wisdom and your love. Amen. So people will amaze you if you're open to being amazed. Am I right? Last weekend, I attended my first Kamloops Okanagan Presbytery event as a member of the Presbytery, and it was amazing. Not that the meeting was amazing. The meeting was good, but I wouldn't call it amazing, right? At least not in the sense of the formal business that we did or the reports that we did. They were good, not amazing. What was amazing was the people. So many good and dedicated and actively engaged, faithful people gathered together, all trying to figure out what this thing called church in this century is all about, right? Like many church meetings, the amazing parts happened outside of the formal meeting times. The time spent in informal conversations. The times where people let go of the formal processes and let go of the titles that we have for one another and simply gather together and share what is on their hearts. That's what makes those things amazing. So I had an epiphany of sorts at one of these informal meeting times. It happened on Saturday evening in an establishment that serves alternative beverages to the normal church coffee and tea. Over a pint of such a beverage, there was a young minister from a shared ministry within this presbytery. He was sitting across from me, and he was animated and excited and talking about how little debate there seemed to be around the report that we'd all heard on how our denomination, how the United Church of Canada is about to restructure itself. And he wondered about that, and he was filled with such passion on each restructuring point. I mean, he knew that report inside and out, and he had really, really good ideas. And as I sat there, I realized how little I cared about how our denomination is going to move from a 4-court system to a 3-court system. So I was content to sit and sip my alternative beverage. I was content to simply listen and to hold on to the realization in the silence of my heart, thank you very much, because sometimes it's good to fly under the radar, so to speak. But then he turned to me and he said, "Jenny, what do you think?" So I've had a few days to think about what I said, and having had the ability to reflect upon it, I should have said that his ideas were great, because they were. What I should have done was discuss the merits of each one of his points. I sure wish I had done that. Because what I actually said wasn't very helpful. I said, "I don't care about any of it." Dead silence, right? You know, and it's not too often I get to genuinely shock people, right? Because I'm a pretty even-keeled person, and I am sociable, and I like people to get along, but I genuinely shocked this young man. And I feel bad about that. I've felt bad about it all week. But it's true, I really don't care how the United Church of Canada chooses to organize itself. What I care about deeply and passionately is how our denomination is going to be a source of life and spiritual well-being in the places where we all live and work and minister. That I will give my lifeblood to. Church structure and church are not the same things in my mind, although they're often confused between the two. They're often confused. But they're very different things. Now this might shock you, but Jesus never ventured an opinion on whether the United Church of Canada should have a 3-court system or a 4-court system. And if he did, it just never made it into the Bible. But Jesus had lots of opinions about the importance of having a relationship with God, about viewing ourselves as beloved, as well as having a positive effect in the lives of everyone around us. Said a lot about that. The restructuring of our denomination is, to me, a sign that our denomination is wise enough to change to fit the time in which we find ourselves. And change is hard and it's often painful, but change is always happening, and we as a church will adapt to whatever it is that comes along. Right? However we choose to organize ourselves, we'll figure it out and we'll live well. Sorry. I think to overly focus on the church structures or how we restructure, to overly focus on that, I think, is to become distracted. Sure, we need to have ways of organizing ourselves, but we as a church do not exist so that the world might become more organized, right? Which is a good thing. We might not be world leaders in organization in some respects. But we exist so that the world might become more loving. We exist so that people might know that they matter, that injustice matters, that healing matters, that reconciliation matters, that community matters, and that peace matters. And so this work of ours isn't simply done at the General Council office in Toronto. And I don't know if that's east, but I'm pointing that way. Nor is it done in Burnaby, where BC Conference makes their home. This work is done right here, where we live. So if Toronto and Burnaby, or another way of phrasing that, General Council and BC Conference, is the ship of the church, then we here in Salmon Arm are the precious cargo. We're what that ship carries. Because it's to us that Jesus entrusted the work of life. And so this is what our story from John is all about this morning. Now, a personal note here, I always wince a little bit when I hear the story. Because, like many of you, I have had people that I have loved deeply die. And being the younger sister of a brother who died as a young man, I sometimes get lost in the shared grief of the sisters of Lazarus. But truly, all of us can relate to what it is to be overwhelmed with grief. All of us can relate to the anguished prayer that was uttered by the sisters. If only God was here, if only God had acted, or if only God would act now, then our person would not have died. And that's a natural part of the grieving process. It's a hard part, for sure, but it's a natural part, and one that hopefully we can move beyond at some point. But this story really isn't about Lazarus, and this story really isn't about his sisters. This story is about Jesus and God and every one of us here. The Gospel of John is a very different kind of literature. And it says right at the very beginning that it's a story that is told so that you might believe. You might believe that God is here and among us. And the miracles of Jesus in that book, the miracles of Jesus, God incarnate, according to John, begin as soon as Jesus sets out on his ministry. His very first miracle turns water into wine. And then with each subsequent miracle, each miracle becomes more and more miraculous, until we get to the story today, the raising of Lazarus. The reason for miracles, the reason Jesus did them, as John tells us, is so that we can see that God is here. That we can see that God is here, we can learn that God is here, and we can live differently because of it. The only problem, though, is that the people are more attracted by the miracles or the deeds of power than they are by the man and his message. And Jesus really struggled with that. And that's why Jesus was angry. He was angry in this passage. He wasn't angry that people were sad over the death of someone they loved. He was angry that the people still could not see that God was at work, even in the moment of death, and that God's work was about bringing and restoring life. Not only that, but we who profess faith, even if we don't always fully understand it, have a role to play in God's work of life. Did you notice in the story that Jesus asked the people to roll away the stone blocking the entrance to the tomb? Did you notice that he asked the people to unbind the risen Lazarus from his grave clothes? I don't know about you, But I would think a man that can raise another man from the grave could certainly have dealt with a big rock and a few strips of linen. So this story was told to remind us that God is here. In a very profound way, God is here. And that God works to bring life, even out of the most heinous or difficult or sad event that we can imagine. It's told to remind us that we, as the precious cargo that we are to be active participants in this giving or renewing of life. That no matter what holds us bound, addictions or grief or bad marriages, bad theology, destructive governments, or no matter what deaths we are experiencing, the physical death of someone we love, the loss of relationship or employment, the loss of a sense of comfort or purpose, no matter those deaths, God is at work. God is at work and is asking us to help move the gravestones and unbind those who are trapped, even if that trapped person is us, so that life can re-emerge. We are not to be like the professional mourners in this story, so focused on that ending, so caught up in the singing of our sad song, so ready to say that there is no hope for anything beyond this sorrowful moment in time. We are not to be like them, being so ready to believe the Fox Newses of the world that say the world is a terrible place, instead of believing that God is here. This creation is good. God is at work. God's only work is life, and thus that is good. Each one of us here is precious cargo, and we need to begin to view ourselves as such. We are precious cargo because we carry within us the gospel. We carry within us the ability to love, to forgive, to hope. We have the ability to rise up and try again. That's the gospel. So if there are things that keep you weighed down, trapped and bound in a place where it seems so incredibly dark, then know that God is inviting you to lay those burdens down today. Lay the sadness down. And let the rest of us help remove the grave clothes from you so that you can step out into the light and the life that awaits, just like Lazarus. Sorry. The same message goes for us as a community of faith. There are things that weigh us down. There are things that make us feel bound and anxious. And these too need to be laid aside. The preoccupation of whether or not the church or our restructured denomination will survive is a burden we need to lay down. We need to fire the professional mourners who have so gleefully gathered to sing of the church's death and listen to Jesus as he calls us out of the tomb. Because there is life for us. We can shed the grave clothes of our despair. As church, as precious cargo, we have gravestones to move and we have parties to attend. So how do we do that stone moving and party going thing? I'm glad you asked. It's simple, really. It's simple, really. And we begin by acknowledging that God is here. That God is here and is working new life among us. And then we join in. I can't overstate the importance of this particular piece. Right? We need to know that God is here. And we need to become good at looking for the signs of life in our world. And then go and work to support that little sign of life so that it can grow into a big sign of life. We join in by not believing that nothing we do, either individually or collectively, will make a difference. We need to let go of that thinking. Everything we do, positive, will make a difference. Small acts, great acts, all important. We join in by being kind to ourselves, forgiving ourselves where needed, and forgiving others in the same way. We join in, and every time we trust one another, even if we don't always agree or understand one another. We join in when we look at our city here in Salmon Arm, our 100-mile house, and see where the gravestones are and work with others to help move them, whether these others will ever attend Sunday worship or not. We join in when we look at our lives and choose to step away from the negative and the dark so that we might concentrate our energy on the light and the life. We join in every time we remember that we are not passive church goers. We are active church beings. We are the precious cargo. The gospel is in us. The world needs us to live that out. May it be so in your life and in mine. Amen.